Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Careers. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Global FP&A Survey Insights, 7 Insights Defining the Evolution of FP&A. I would like to thank our sponsor, Profix, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible and also played a big part in the survey results we are going to focus on for our webinar today. 3 leading FP&A thought leaders, myself, James Myers, the CEO of FP&A Strategy Consulting, and Larissa Melnichuk, the CEO of FP&A Trends and founder of the International FP&A Board, collaborated to develop the initial FP&A Empowerment, Technology, and Trends Survey to identify and analyze current and emerging trends relative to how companies are leveraging technology, the maturity of their analytic solutions, the effectiveness and efficiency of their planning processes, and the willingness of executives to listen and to invest in FP&A. Today, James Myers and I will review the compelling survey results, which are based on the insights of over 300 FP&A and finance leaders across the globe. Key themes include the current state of the union relative to FP&A processes and tactics, obstacles to FP&A success relative to technology, data, and culture, and what FP&A and finance leaders need and want to do to optimize the strategic value that FP&A offers at their companies. We will share 7 insights that are defining the evolution of FP&A. Note, this will be a particularly interactive webinar as there will be 7 polling questions, yes, 7 polling questions, and we will be sharing interactive data visualizations relative to the survey results. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury Careers, cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to welcome my speaking partner, James Myers, to the webinar. Treasury Careers offers content and resources that empower Treasury professionals to own their career success. A lot of great job opportunities listed on treasuryjobs.com. On Treasury Careers, we have a plethora of Treasury certification resources, Treasury best practices, and of course, we offer complimentary webinars like this one today. A few housekeeping items. Those of you who are interested in CTP or FP&A credit, you'll have to answer all the polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions on CTP or FP&A credit, please send an email to ernie@treasurycareers.com. We'd like to hear from you, so please ask questions for the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. If we do not get to your questions, fear not. We will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of our webinar today. Now it's my distinct pleasure to welcome my speaking partner, James Myers, to the webinar. James is the founder and CEO of FP&A Strategy Consulting, a company focused on accelerating finance transformation. He is passionate about FP&A and is presented at various finance summits. He's a qualified chartered accountant and has held various finance and operations leadership roles in multinationals such as Dell and Nokia, and has clients such as Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. James, just want to welcome you to the webinar. Welcome, my friend.
Thanks, Ernie. It's great to be here, and I just wanted to say thank you very much as well to everyone that participated in the survey. We've had over 300 participants that have given their insights, so it's really made it a useful tool to really understand what's happening in the market in FP&A and really get a great insight into kind of how the FP&A function is evolving. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, James. So how are we going to accomplish our objectives for today? We're going to review the FP&A Trend Survey. We're going to review the background and demographics. We're going to really focus on 7 key survey insights. Again, in those data visualizations, I think you'll find those very enlightening. It's going to be a tool that I'm hoping to see more surveys utilize. Then we're going to offer some closing thoughts and recommendations, and of course, offer you some additional resources as well. So one of the reasons that we developed the survey was we wanted to find out how empowered FP&A are in terms of supporting their CFOs in their new role in this world. So the FP&A Empowerment, the Evolution of Technology and Trends Survey explores the maturity of the analytics solutions, the effectiveness and efficiencies of their planning processes, how companies are leveraging technology, and initial perceptions relative to the value of FP&A. A little bit of the background on the survey demographics. As James mentioned, we had 311 responses. You can see from across the globe, 46% in North America, a good concentration in Europe and Asia Pacific, and also the Middle East. We had a really good mix in terms of company size, and I was really pleased to see really a really good focus actually across the spectrum, right? It's almost even with a lot of enterprise companies, big mid-market companies, all the way down to the smaller companies as well. As far as job levels, we had the senior level folks, obviously, and some managers and VPs. So we got the folks that are really two sections actually running the show, but those that are actually more involved in the executions. We also had a good mix of industries, as you can see. Top 10 industries, we had manufacturing, software technology, banking, financial services, down to healthcare, pharmaceuticals, energies, and construction. So that's really what make the results so compelling given the demographics. So one of the things that we were able to do and what we'll show you in our visualizations is how you're able to use a data visualization tool to slice and dice. So you can look at the aggregate data, but then you can also look at the differences relative to the key insights based on location, on the company size, and also on the industry. So it's very interesting for me to see that. I've never seen this in the past, given all my experience involved in surveys as well. So the first thing that we want to look at in terms of one of the themes we identified was FP&A Analytics maturity. This is a great tool developed by the International FP&A Board, courtesy of Larissa Melnichuk, who is a key partner of us on our survey. So what it does, it really allows companies to assess the analytics maturity at their company, and it breaks it down into obviously 5 states: basic, developing, define, advanced, and leading. And if you look at, there's a lot of information here, but there's really 3 key pieces of it as you go from left to right in terms of the complexity of your process. So on the left side, we have more formal process. On the right, we have integrated planning process. And then we have, in terms of collaboration, right? People process, right? You know where I'm going with this? No collaboration. And then on the right, we have real-time collaborative planning. And a lot of times that's facilitated by technology. And then, of course, technology, we look at it in terms of analytical matrices, models and tools, and BI tools. If we look at the far right, we see integrated driver-based planning model with connected BI, and then leading analytical matrices. So what we saw in the survey was 55% of our survey respondents were in the developing state, which is basic or developing, 28% in that defined, and then 17% in that advanced and leading state. Another thing that I think is really interesting is how this can be used as a tool to assess where you are, and then kind of what do you need in terms of people, process, and technology to get you over to that next state. So now, James, I'd like to bring you in here for a moment. So first of all, what did you think of these percentages in general? Is that what you expected? And also, can you give us a little sense from what you're seeing as to what do you think are the key things from companies to moving from saying to that developing or defined state, or what do you think are the inherent barriers from companies making that move from left to right?
Thanks, Ernie. I think, yeah, so the results are pretty much where I expected them to be. I think from what I'm seeing in the marketplace and meeting a lot of clients is that, you know, a lot of people are in that developing stage. Not necessarily in the basic one, but, you know, getting to a stage where they are considering improving their tools and getting investment in so that they can improve their tools. So I think that the survey results are in line with what we're expecting. We do see some companies in the leading stage, and again, you know, being able to move from the developing stage and to the leading stage requires a lot of things to come together. One of them is just getting that senior leadership buy-in and making sure that senior leadership understand the value of FP&A. And, you know, as we go through the survey, we also kind of look into that and try and answer those questions about how engaged are senior leadership. You know, the next step is obviously getting the investment and understanding kind of where do we want to invest. And, planning tools and BI tools are probably the area that I think in a lot of companies haven't been invested in a long time. So again, we also drill into a lot of those sort of questions. But ultimately, this is a great framework for helping companies figure out how do I move from that kind of developing state into that intermediate and leading state. And so it's a great methodology for kind of taking those steps forward.
Great. Thank you very much. So with that, as promised, we're going to make this an interactive session. So we're going to go ahead and ask you that same question that we just looked at. So we're asking you, how would you characterize the current level of FP&A analytics maturity at your company? Of course, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. Those of you interested in FP&A or CTP credits, you'll need to answer all of our polling questions. Also, I'm going to remind you several times that we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. We have a renowned subject matter expert here with us, James Myers, so I'd like you to take the opportunity to tap into his knowledge. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave the polling question up for another few seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the results, and I'm going to give my comments, and then I'm going to throw it over to James, and he's going to give his commentary as well, and then we'll start to dial down into our first insight, which is that there is a level of FP&A analytics maturity that is prevalent today. So let's go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and share those results. So it looks like we're tilted even a little bit more in the survey to that basic developing state. So we have 68%. I think we had 55%. So we've got folks in this basic or developing state. It goes along with the comment that you made, James, perfectly, in that what you're seeing is a lot of companies are in the developing state. What are your initial thoughts here, James?
Yeah, I think this aligns with the survey. The result is, the overwhelming state at the moment is developing. We see on the survey we've got 42. And in our survey here, we've got 50. So it's definitely the one that kind of is where the majority of people are in at the moment. And, the good news is that, there's a few things that you can do, and there's like costs that can come down on a lot of the technologies and things that can really help your companies kind of get to the next level. So, it's I think the first step is building that awareness, and then the second is to kind of get that senior level leadership buy-in to really help grow the organization and build the technology that you need to support that organization.
Great, thank you very much, James. So I'm going to go ahead and cover a few of the data points. So we came up with these insights, and there are some data points that help support those insights that we came to, and then we're going to go ahead and take a deeper dive, and we're going to take a look at data visualizations, and James is going to take us through those and explain why we decided to go that route and the value that gives. So we already talked about this. Over half of the companies report to being in a basic or developing state. Another thing which conveys that analytical immaturity, only 43% of companies are leveraging analytics to predict future results, and only 28% are leveraging analytics to prescribe what actions should be taken. So to really optimize the value, that is probably the most valuable thing that we can do, is we want to facilitate data-driven decision making. So we want to get to the point on transformative state where we're making prescriptions, right, for what should be done. And then the other thing which stood out was only 41% of companies report that most decisions are based on data. So that's going to give us a little preview in that I think we're going to see a little bit of a data shortage. So I'm going to go ahead right now and turn the floor over to James Myers, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the data visualization. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and what we're going to see is some of those visualizations, and what we're going to see is more of the questions that were involved. So James, we can see your screen. Take it away, my friend.
All right. So this is the data visualization. So we've taken our 311 responses, and we put it into a BI solution so that we can really kind of drill into a lot of the information. In the top here, we have the traditional tree charts. So we've got here, these are the different regions, and you can see each region is the size of the block is really telling us how many there are. So 140 responses from North America, 88 from Europe. We've done the same with the type of business, so manufacturing, financial services, technology. We have grouped a lot of the smaller ones into other. We've also got the size of the company. So we've got a greater than 5 billion is in the red there, and then 1 to 5 billion over there, and then 25 million to 100 million over there, and we've also got different grades of people that enter the information. So if we have a look at the chart here, we can see this is our analytics maturity. You can see the 42% and the 13% making up the 55% we saw earlier. And now what we can do is we can actually drill down into it. So if we have a look at what we're seeing in North America, we are seeing that there is the basic is a lot smaller, developing is a lot larger, and I think it's starting to look a lot like the graph that we saw depicted in the responses that we saw from the people on the webinar. But so we can see that a large section of the developing. So what is interesting is when we flip to Europe, you can see that the basic is actually increased. What you do notice is that developing is decreased by the same amount. But effectively, we're still at that sort of 55, 52% range. What is interesting is, as we start to look in differences between the technology again also, basic is a lot smaller than when we look at something like in manufacturing, where we see there's a lot more in the basic category. And also what we're seeing is that we're not seeing leading in manufacturing. So technology is definitely probably leading the way when it comes to sort of the technology. So just flipping back now to the total. What I did find quite interesting is as we start to drill into that basic, you can see having a look here, and we talked a bit about data-driven decision making. We saw, and this graph here, now that I've clicked on the basic, we're seeing where a basic, where we have a basic maturity, we are seeing that lesser reliance is used on data. So we're seeing that there's an equal amount or a small amount or a very small amount of data is actually being used to make decisions. Only 18%, we'll just flip that back, versus the 44%, where a large proportion of data is being used to make decisions. So it's really, if we can start to, if we can start to move out of this basic area, and even when we look at developing, we see that smaller percentage is being used for in decision making. We also see when we're looking at the basic and the developing, we also see the prescribed and the predictive future. We're seeing sort of a lesser percentage. So now that's dropped down to 10% and 18% versus the average of 28 and 43%. So you can see the knock-on effect of where you are in your data maturity, and being able to build out your data maturity so that you can start to really think about how do you develop not only your data-driven decision making, but also your prescriptive action and your predicting the future analytics. So let's just jump now very quickly into the leading, and you'll see immediately the leading indicators, and you'll see suddenly these bars jump up. So the guys that are in the leading category, they're really focused on this prescriptive action, predicting the future, and really 88% of their decision making is all around data, and even large percentage, actually 100% is made around data. So that is a really telling sign about using that framework to move across helps you to also companies to really focus on making more data-driven decisions, but also their reporting and leveraging analytics for more action and predicting the future. I'm going to turn you back to Ernie.
Great. Thank you very much, James. So I just wanted to comment on just the power of this data visualization tool. And I just want to let everyone know that in the post-webinar survey, we're going to ask you if you are interested in having access to this data visualization tool. As a practitioner myself who took surveys, I would have just been fascinated to be able to kind of play around with the data and look at the demographics and really dial those in on my company. So thank you very much, James. So I'm going to go ahead and tee us up for our next insight by launching our next polling question. So our next polling question is asking you how much time you are able to spend on high value activities. So we have less than 10%, between 10 and 25%, between 25 and 50%, 50 and 75%, and more than 75%. So one of the things that we were trying to do was really see how much time where the FP&A folks are able to do things that offer strategic value, and then start to take a look back and seeing what are the potential obstacles that are keeping them from doing high value activities. And then obviously that information could be very valuable to senior leaders as you start to see opportunities. Let's say you do an upgrade in technology or you change a process, that's going to be able to allow folks to shift the focus on where they're spending their time. So let me go ahead and close this and share the results. Then I'll take my initial pass, then I'll let James offer his thoughts as well. So let me go ahead and share the results. So what we see is more than 75%. We have 0%, which I am sad to see. So we thought we'd like to see that. And then we have 14% between 50 and 75%. So we see that there. And then we have 52% between 10 and 25%. So I think that number is a little bit lower than what we'll take a look at. In that survey, I think what that survey showed us what was that 20% of time was actually spent on the high value activity. So James, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, and again, this is in line with our expectations. I think the challenge with the FP&A function and finance as a larger organization, I think, is the challenge of time. We're as a function, we're pulled into so many different areas, and a lot of them, for example, things like making data validation, data collection, the forecasting process. These aren't high value activities, and people within organizations are being pulled into all of these activities. Whereas spending time being a business partner, becoming more strategic, understanding the business, driving business behavior and things like that are things that the original concept of the FP&A role was set out to achieve. Where not only would an organization have a finance lead, which would be responsible for making sure that the historical data was correct and the historical performance was understood. But now people have the expectation on finance is to be far more forward-looking and really driving the business forward and really understanding kind of where the pitfalls are in that. And unfortunately, the time that we get allocated to that is very limited. Now, what we did in the survey, which is, I think this is on your next slide, is we asked not only where you spend your time at the moment, both in the three categories of low value, which is sort of data collection, data validation, medium, which is kind of your forecasting and things like that, and then high value activities, which is your business partnering. But we also asked respondents where they aspire to be. So it really kind of gives a greater insight into not only where they are today, but where they also aspire to be. So
great.
Back to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for teeing up. So just as James was saying, so if we take a look at the current what's going on with these FP&A teams, where they're spending their time, where would they like to spend their time. So on average, they'd like to spend 48% of their time on high value activities, and they only spend 20% today. It looks like our survey respondents on average may spend even less than 20%. One of the interesting demographics to look at, we sliced it by title, and this is a little bit alarming. Those with the title of vice president are only able to spend 17% of their time on high value activities. What I would hope to see would be what I'd hope to see would be that they would have a much higher percentage on their time. So our insight number 2 was that FP&A teams aspire to be more strategic and influential as well. So let's go ahead and our next insight would be that FP&A teams are investing their time inefficiently. So we have 32% of companies report it takes longer than 3 months to complete the budget process. And another point, companies allocate over 50% of their time allocated to data.
Ernie?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't see the slides.
Okay. Can you see the slides at this point? There we go. Can you see the slides now, James?
Still not seeing the slides. Okay.
There we go. Okay, great. So my apologies. So again, we talked about the desired versus the current, and how the title of vice president was something where we were expecting to see higher value activities. And then in terms of our third insight was that FP&A invests their time inefficiently. So again, to go back, 32% of companies report it takes longer than 3 months to complete the budget process, and 44% take longer than 5 business days to complete a forecast, and only 22% of companies can produce a forecast in 2 days or less. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the data visualizations associated with insights number 2. FP&A folks aspire to be more strategic and influential, and that they invest their time inefficiently. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor back over to James, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at those data visualizations associated with those insights. James?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right. So we flipped over to the FP&A teams aspire to be more strategic. And here you can see what Ernie talked about is in our survey, we asked respondents to give a percentage basis based on these 3 categories and where they aspire to be. So the current results end up being that 20.7% are in the high category, and they aspire to be 48%. If we have a look at North America, for example, what is interesting is that pretty much all the regions follow, and pretty much everybody follows a very similar profile. So again, we're looking at 21% versus 48%. In Europe, it's slightly better. Oh, actually, it's slightly worse because it's only 19% versus the 48%. If we have a look at Asia, 20% versus almost 50%. Again, if we go across over and look at our different, let me just flip out of that. If we have a look at our manufacturing and technology, 23% and 48%, manufacturing 19 and 46. So very, very similar trends across all the industries. Even if we look at sort of go into the director level, 21% and 50%, and this is the one that kind of really stuck out a bit, which was the VPs, 16.8% and 47%. So basically, what this is telling us is that people really want to be spending at least half of their time on more value-added activities. We are seeing that a lot of these activities are being driven by, the budget process, the finance process, and analytics, which I think we're going to jump into in a bit more detail. So I'm going to hand you back to Ernie.
Great. Thank you very much, James. So now we're going to go ahead and tee up our next polling question. So it's asking you to share with us the terms of data available to support the FP&A function at your company. Do you have the right data at the right time? Right data not timely? Data overload? Do you have a data shortage but making progress? Data shortage but not a priority? Again, I sincerely appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. If you are interested in receiving CTP or FP&A credits, you need to answer all of our polling questions. Again, we'd appreciate your consideration in asking questions, and we'll get to your questions at the tail end of the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and close that polling question and go ahead and pop the results up. Then we'll take a quick look, and then we'll compare those to the survey. So what we see is right data, right time is 9%, and that's alarmingly low, but that's pretty consistent with what we saw on our survey. I think we saw 12%. We call the right data, right time data nirvana. Data overload, 22%. I think that's a little bit higher a number than we saw before. And I'll let James comment on how companies might go about addressing that. Anything sticking out to you here, James?
No, I think this is pretty much where we're seeing a lot of the trends lying, and there is a data shortage, and people are working to try and help close that gap on the data. There's a lot of with big data and the real focus on data that we're seeing in the industry at the moment. I think people are aware of the challenges that they're facing. I think finance is not, is included in that, but the challenges of data. Where we're seeing the major problems in data are master data management, where the underlying hierarchies can be different by organization. It's the same data, and it's very difficult to draw conclusions across the organization as everybody has a different interpretation of what the data means. So, being able to consolidate data and put it all into the same place, and being able to build out data solutions is a critical part of the FP&A function, especially when it relates to the finance data.
Great. Thank you very much, James. And as we saw from the audience results, kind of supported our insight for that we saw. Companies have a shortage of the right data. The big thing that stuck out was 88% of companies, they struggle with data quality. Only 12% have access to the right data in a timely manner, which is consistent with the 9% that we saw. And then companies in pharmaceutical, chemical, and healthcare are relatively most challenged, as no company reported being in a state of data nirvana. And each industry had a relatively high percentage of companies on data overload. So pharmaceutical, chemical, 29% and 19% respectively. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor over to James again, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the associated data visualizations that really speak to the shortage of data and the challenges that is causing FP&A teams in delivering that strategic value to their organization. James?
Tony, can you see my screen yet?
Yes, I can.
All right, so here's the visualization, and you can see that this tiny little sliver here, not working on getting data, small piece, but really what we're seeing is that the majority of people are working to get the right data. Data is not timely, and only a small percentage is, we're seeing where we have this idea of data nirvana. Again, we can drill down into the various categories, and what we're seeing is, Europe is, I think there's a larger percentage on really working on getting that data. So, one of the other areas I just wanted to kind of touch on, and we go back to this slide here, is really about, the time spent on data as well. So, the challenge, I think what we're seeing, Ernie, is that, a lot of time is spent by FP&A organizations on data collection and data validation as well. So we're looking at almost 50% across the board there. So, these are some of the challenges that we're seeing really helping to drive not only the time obstacle, but also being, the ability for people to really build in, and get value out of their data. Building out this data nirvana piece means that we really want to be able to reduce the amount of time we spend on data collection, data validation. If you're in a situation where you can get the data up front and and know that it's accurate and be able to draw insights from it without spending time trying to find it or check it, then I think that's a very important area.
Yeah.
If we look in this area of working on getting us the data, we do see that a lot of the respondents are also very much reliant on Excel, and you can see that's above average, 25% there, already basic ERP modules and things like that. So what we're seeing is that technology definitely does play a big part in this moving from this working and building up your data into sort of this data nirvana. The technology plays quite a large role. If we go into something like here, we're looking at more advanced cloud-based solutions and cutting-edge machine learning and things like that. So definitely we can see a very strong trend in investment in technology to being able to move your data maturity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The other thing I kind of wanted to note here, which you may have touched on, was on the far right side on this visualization that 31% have no single version of the data truth as well, and I'm sure that's related to technology. But I thought that was interesting as well. That was still a key challenge. So it really doesn't matter if you have all the data if there's no single version of the truth, and so you really have to be able to trust your data as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and tee up our next insight. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to launch our next polling question, which is, how modern are your company's reporting and analytical tools? Very basic Excel, basic ERP module, intermediate, a homegrown planning, BI solution, advanced cloud-based planning solution, or cutting-edge machine learning and advanced analytics. So again, appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. And we appreciate your patience as we go through the technology and really trying to offer you a truly unique experience in toggling back and forth between the data visualizations, but also your patience in that we're asking you to be a lot more interactive in the polling questions. So I hope this is making a unique and more valuable webinar experience for everyone on the webinar. So let me go ahead and we'll go ahead in a few seconds and we'll go ahead and close the results, and then we'll take a quick peek and we'll make a few comments, and then we'll get on to our next insight, which will be, we kind of teed that up a little bit, which will be the level of technological immaturity that many companies are facing. Let's go ahead and share the results. And as you can see, we still have quite a few folks in that very basic Excel model, that Excel and very basic ERP module. And I think we see a little bit higher percentage in the advanced, maybe in the cutting edge area. James, do you have any thoughts here?
Talking about technology, Ernie, for some reason I cannot see the screen, so I'm gonna play around with this. Oh, there we go. I can see it now. Brilliant. Yeah. So I think again, Excel is a great tool. It's one of the tools that I think FP&A have adopted quite a long time ago, and people have a lot of experience in it. It's very adaptable, agile, and you can build stuff really quickly in it. The problem is you can cheat a lot. So data can get a bit manipulated out of the system, which is a big concern if you're thinking about how to build a solid data foundation. But it's a tool that is effective and does the job really well. So I'm not surprised to see that it's high up there. We see a lot of the homegrown stuff, people kind of putting a lot of stuff together. There's been over the years, there's been a lot of investment, but definitely sort of the cloud-based technologies now are starting to appear more and more. Especially I think there's a question that's coming up about modeling. We do see that the challenge of sort of the more basic homegrown ones is that the challenge of being able to do modeling is a particular challenge. So Yeah, so I think that's, I think, as we start to see, and what is going to be interesting is as we start to run the survey over the next few years, we'll be able to see how these trends change. And it'll be interesting to see how, especially this part of the evolution starts to happen, where people are starting to invest in moving away from the more Excel as an analytical tool to more robust solutions.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so just a couple more top line observations, and then we'll toggle back to some digital visualizations about our Insight 5 around that there's also a level of technological immaturity. Thing that really stands out to me here is only 10% of companies report that they find it somewhat or very easy to perform scenario analysis, and business agility is extremely critical in today's world, so that really inhibits that. And then the other kind of behind that is just there's an inherent barrier to investment in technology. 50% of companies report they're mindful of technology, but seldom upgrade, and another 28% are not looking or unlikely to upgrade. So I think that there's also some inherent barriers that exist that companies, and that we'll talk about that, can go to culture as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the floor back over to James, and we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the data visualizations around the technological immaturity. And of course, what you're starting to see is that a lot of these insights that we're seeing are kind of interrelated to each other, and they're driven off of each other. And some of this is just going around the company culture that we're seeing. So James, we can see your screen now. Take it away. James, we're having trouble hearing you. There we go.
Sorry about that, Ernie. So really, where we're looking at data maturity, we're looking at data is not only turned into information, but also insights. Everybody in the company has access. Metrics are successfully designed to make people accountable. There's a single system of truth, and reporting solutions. All data are accurate, and everyone has the same taxonomy. What we are seeing is that these metrics are very low. When we ask the question, this is one question, but you could choose as many answers as you thought were relevant. And so really what we're seeing is that across the board, really, the data maturity is very low. We don't really see it really bumping up much more than 30%. In Africa, I guess it was a little bit. But let's just flip that back to having a look at maybe technology and see how that is. It doesn't seem to make too much of a difference. But what we're seeing is that there's the gray area is really kind of the gap of where we need to be heading. I'm going to just jump over to this one here, which we talked a little bit about. And I think this one is very relevant for the FP&A organization as we sort of come into the 21st century, is the ability to do scenario analysis. What this graph here is telling us is that 65% of companies find it very difficult or somewhat difficult to do any type of scenario analysis. So we talked a bit about the tools earlier, the Excels and like the homegrown solutions, but really, across the board, we're seeing, if we look at Europe, even in Europe, we're seeing, it's extremely difficult to do these scenario analysis, and very easy. It's a very small percentage of them. If we just flip between technology, here we're seeing again, similar trends. And even, when we look at manufacturing, technology seems to be slightly ahead, but when we look at manufacturing, there's just a very small amount where we're seeing the scenario analysis. So, when we talk about the maturity and, moving along that scale, there's definitely a lot of the advantages of the newer systems where you can do the scenario analysis, are lacking in a lot of companies at the moment. So, there's definitely an opportunity to kind of move this across to being easier to do for people, because that's where you really get a deeper understanding of your business, is being able to say, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? And how does that impact, the overall number? And that's where the FP&A organization really needs to strive for. Okay, hand it back to you, Ernie.
All right. Thank you very much, James, for your great insight. And we're going to go ahead and launch our next polling question to tee up our next insight. So next polling question is asking you to respond. Your reaction: the CEO and CFO understand the strategic value that FP&A function delivers at my company. We have agree, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. So this is going to really lead in to our next insight, which is around the perceptions and the possibility that they might be inhibiting investment in FP&A. And then we'll take a look at some of the dimensions of those barriers in terms of folks' perceptions, and maybe we'll talk about how we might be able to impact some of those perceptions. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave that polling question up for a few more minutes. Then I'm going to go ahead, a few seconds. Then I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So let's go ahead and take a look at those results. And it looks like here we have a better understanding of the value. So we have 60% agree or strongly agree. So I think that's going to be higher that what we've seen, significantly higher. I think what we saw in the survey was over 50% conveyed their companies don't think FP&A delivers high strategic value, and then we see disagree and strongly disagree at 14%, and then neutral. James, any initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the survey now, and it is pretty much aligned. I think that actually the survey we're seeing is that 48% of people agreed, and then 22% strongly agreed. So that's pretty much in line. I think we're seeing across the board that there is this. It's about the 70-30 split where we're seeing that people agree and disagree. So that it is. There is still a lot of work to go to make sure that we as an organization sell the value of FP&A. And I think, we talked a bit about the challenges of time and how much time is being spent on value add, high value add and low value add. And I think, it's kind of a vicious circle because, we can only sell things where we're adding value to the organization, yet we don't have the time to do it. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to happen in that area where we need to focus the FP&A organization and really get, real big value add areas and being able to sell that into the organization. So, my recommendation always is tackle things that are smaller, that make a big impact and build a lot of visibility, and then build on that, continue to build on it. So deliver often and try and build as much value into that as possible.
Great. Thank you very much. So just some more color behind the contention that perceptions are inhibiting investment in FP&A. 27% of respondents conveyed their companies don't view FP&A as an area of strategic investment. And then 38% reported it was difficult to justify the ROI investing versus shorter term things in terms of sales and marketing. And then I think I might have been focused on this result instead of the polling question we actually asked, which was that 55% of respondents conveyed their companies don't think that FP&A delivers high strategic value. And that's really what our goal is, to get us to that transformative state. So we're delivering that value, and that value is being recognized by our executives. So we're going to go ahead and hand the floor back over to James, and he's going to go ahead and take us through some of the visualizations that are relevant to those perceptions, and we'll take a look at the thoughts of the CEOs and CFOs and the executives, and then we'll take a look, dig into the demographics, as James has been doing such a great job of throughout the presentation, and then we'll see if we are having some differences based on the geography and the job title and other areas as well. There we go. Jess, we can see your screen. Take it away, my friend.
All right. So I think the one area that really stood out when we did this survey, which was completely unexpected, is probably this one in the far right-hand side. The FP&A has a positive impact on the bottom line. My understanding of FP&A is that we really work with business to help drive not only cost reduction, which is more traditional, but also to understand and drive additional sales. And, you know, both of those two elements really impact the bottom line. 34% of survey respondents said that they didn't think that FP&A impacted the bottom line, which is, well, we're neutral on it. There's only 32 and 12% that agreed to it, and even some people said that they disagreed to it. So that was the one that really stood out for me, because I think, you know, that is definitely, I would say, part of our function is to really help the organization not only understand, you know, how we're performing, but also to be able to drive the bottom line. As we look in different areas, we will see that, you know, there's a stronger understanding of strategic value in the US compared to maybe somewhere like Europe, where we're seeing it. Let me just flip this, where it's slightly lagging behind the average, but not significantly. So it's really, you know, we're seeing you know, 53% and 25%, so a lot higher percentages there. Delivering strategic FP&A, delivering strategic value. You know, again, we're seeing North America on a higher note than Europe. So if we jump into just the different job titles as well, let's just have a look at the C-suite. You know, they tend to be. What is interesting is they believe that they agree that there's a higher percentage, 36% agree that there's a positive impact. If we jump into the VPs, they're pretty much in line. Let's just look at directors. Again, managers. So I think here's the one that's really driving this delta is, you know, the managers, the guys on the front line, they don't feel that there's this positive impact of FP&A on the bottom line, which is very interesting. You can see that even, you know, look at the disagrees are really above the neutral. So really, it's I think, you know, if in the organization, what this is really highlighting is that you know, the guys on the front line are not really seeing the impact that they're having. I think the executive team is definitely having a better understanding of the impact of FP&A on the bottom line. Again, this is something that we continually need to sell within the organization. Some of the challenges we're seeing on, you know, investment in FP&A is really around, you know, what is the ROI? Measuring the ROI of an organization is very difficult when, you know, especially for FP&A, it's a lot more long-term. FP&A is not considered a strategic investment. Those are the two big ones where we're seeing a lot of challenges, and the reason why there's low investment in FP&A. And you can see that these are pretty much consistent across the board. Even Asia is almost 50% is really being able to justify that ROI. Right? I'm going to flip it back, Tony.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and launch our next polling question to tee up our seventh and final insights, asking you which of the following would be most useful in moving your current level of FP&A analytics at your company to the next level. So again, we're going to go ahead and leave the survey the polling question, up for a few more seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at those results, and then we'll get on to our seventh survey insight and see if that leads in and is consistent with what our FP&A leaders need to deliver strategic value at their company. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question and go ahead and share those results, and then I'll just let you, James, go ahead and see let you share with us if there's anything that you see that surprises you here.
No, I think technology is the one that stands out. 40%. We are seeing, you know, a large percentage of people already, you know, feel that there's new innovations in technology. But I think, you know, what is important is, you know, technology isn't necessarily going to solve all the issues. You know, as you start to look at technologies and things like that, you do need to think about the processes underlying this. So we see process improvement and also, you know, the people behind it as well. So it's really being able to make sure that it's not only when you think about how we build out the technology and bring in new technologies to solve certain problems, but it's also about understanding and making sure that people and process are also brought into the loop in that.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. So that supports, our seventh contention is that what FP&A leaders need, they need better data, better technology, and more accountability. They were asked to identify the most important driver impacting the maturity that could make them upgrade. 31% reported upgrading technology and 30% increased collaboration. And then they're asked to identify which areas among the many listed were in need of investment. And then interesting to me was that only 37% and 33% of companies respectively identified operational planning and management reporting as areas requiring investment. So we're going to go ahead and do this handoff one more time, James. Going to go ahead and take a look at really some questions that we ask in order to really get an understanding of what FP&A leaders feel that they need to offer more value to their companies. One of the questions that we ask, which I think is particularly interesting, is we ask them if they had one wish to improve the FP&A function at their company, what would that wish be? So we're really trying to get down to it and what that wish would be. James, take it away, my friend.
Okay, so I think we saw that technology in the survey came up as tops, but it's making sure we have the right systems in place. We can see across the board. I think accountability is also one of the big areas that people really hope to get more focus on, and especially as we look through, those are definitely the top two. Doesn't matter which region you're looking at. I'm just going to flip between technology here. Technology, we're also looking at potentially the right strategy and executive report. Those seem to be trending pretty well. In manufacturing, it's again a right system and accountability. There is some executive support, I think, similar to what we saw previously. Let's just jump into let's just see the large companies. So wow, this is amazing. So the greater than 5 billion companies. It's really about getting the right systems in, and I think they're suffering from a lot of legacy systems. Whereas I think when you start to look at the smaller companies, they're a bit more agile, and you can see we see a spread across the board. So some really interesting insights in just what people are hoping to get improvements in is a bit of a spread depending on what the size of the company is.
Okay, thank you very much, James. So in order to be mindful of our time, we're going to have to move on to closing thoughts. We will certainly follow up with you on your questions after the webinar. Just a few closing thoughts, recommendations. The FP&A analytical state's not set for the 21st century. Over half of companies reported being in the basic or developing states. The biggest obstacles of analytical transformation is the data. 88% of the companies struggle with that. And then just the tools that companies are using, 40% report only having basic, very basic or basic analytical tools. And some recommendations: the business culture needs to be amenable to change. FP&A teams need to do a better job selling the value they provide to ensure continued investment. Drive opportunities to rationalize and free up time on low value activities so time can be spent on more high value activities. Data company is the most valuable asset, and investment in data quality should be an investment priority. Infrastructure needs to be transformed at many companies, investments in people, innovative solutions and systems. And then finally, the business culture needs to be amenable to change, and FP&A teams needed to do a better job. Again, make that point twice on purpose of selling the value they provide to ensure that continued investments. Have some additional resources for you as well. We have a white paper based on the survey results. However, I would like to let you know that we are in the process of finalizing the full survey report. So this webinar was kind of the first in 3 steps to offer you continuous value around the survey and the insights. One would be that final survey report, but then also would be the data visualizations that we talked about. So we're going to work with our partners to get you access to those as well. I would like to thank my speaking partner. I'm going to go ahead and launch one final polling question real quick as I close out.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay. I would like to once again thank my speaking partner, James, for your great insights and content. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Profix. We appreciate their commitment to thought leadership, which is evident in the great content and resources they offer, which you can review by visiting the Profix website. Please note you'll have the opportunity to request to be connected with our featured speaker, James Myers, via our post-webinar survey that will launch immediately following the webinar. And finally, thank you to the audience. Thank you so much for your valuable time and your patience as we delivered a truly interactive webinar today, and make the rest of your day great. Thank you very much, everyone.